Widening social rifts define our era, driven by indignant anger and manipulation through engineered fear and division. To move forward and heal, we need secure men and strong women. But more importantly, we must learn how to listen to each other. As I asked women around me how I could help, I started to understand that the idea I once considered a conclusion was only the beginning.
Women want to be heard, but it's not enough yet. So don't just hear us, but hear us when we say that everything that's happening is not enough to treat us as fully valuable, fully worthy human beings, equal in every way to men.
A unified answer that branches out into infinite diversity, with one common factor. The people not listening tend to be men.
But women cannot make men listen, and certainly cannot integrate what they hear into understanding and action. Only men can do that for themselves.
So if men can't listen to women, LGBTQ+, minority groups, or other people with different perspectives, maybe they can listen to a man having a conversation with these people. I'm inviting you into my journey to become a better listener and meet some intriguing people along the way. Hello and welcome back to the If Men Can't Listen To podcast. I know it's been a little bit since I said I was going to start doing this regularly, so I apologize. The reality of what I think this ongoing project is going to evolve more into a when the opportunity for the conversation presents itself kind of thing. I'm asking people to give some pretty deep dive, personal, introspective conversations to us, and I think that's going to come with a little bit of patience required to really just give it the what's what I'm looking for. Give it the respect and weight that it deserves instead of just trying to churn things out. So this is going to be a when it happens kind of podcast going forward. Anyways, I've done enough talking about myself, this podcast, and updates. I want to introduce our guest, Cari, who has started her own law firm and become very involved in keeping the Garden of Freedom well tended. So without me just going ahead and telling her life story, I just want to introduce Cari and let her talk a little bit about herself and her legal career and activism.
Hey Shane, thanks for having me. I think your project is awesome. As you've said to me, a lot of this is about modeling conversations, and I think that's beautiful. So I'm excited to be part of the conversation with you. So a little bit about little old me. I'm a New Yorker, born and bred. I'm from an immigrant family. There are, roughly 6 whole people in my family, and they all continue to live in New York. And I moved out here after law school for what I thought was going to be a 2-year job. And then Minneapolis took me in, and over time it became home. And post-surge, I really don't think I could live anywhere else. But I've worked everywhere. I've been in big law, I've been a government lawyer, and nothing really seemed to fit. And as of January 1st, I started my own law firm, Lotus Legal, where I do criminal defense, civil rights, and a little sprinkle of cannabis law. And then on January 7th, they murdered Renee Good. And it has been a pretty incredible journey for the first time in my career, not having to ask anybody for permission before I speak, and aligning the way that I spend my time with how I want to be spending my time, and fighting the battles that I want to fight with the battles that I want to fight.
That kind of empowerment has to feel good.
Oh, I think everybody that knows me well is terrified for me. I think that I've gotten a lot of, are you sure you're not ruining your life here? And the answer is maybe I am, but I spent a lot of time living somebody else's life, and I am really excited to be stepping into whatever this thing that I'm doing is. It's important to me, and showing up in it is important to me. And it's been a moment for Minneapolis. It's been a personal moment too, to participate.
And I'm gonna quote one of the largest religions in the United States, or in the world when you think about it, Star Trek. In this case, Deep Space Nine. They had a episode called "Fortune Favors the Bold," and just that whole it's weird. It's like a little snippet of a TV show's name of an episode, but I mean it's an old saying too. But the people who, despite the fear and the risks of taking some of these more dangerous initiatives, those are the people that the history books tend to remember. And it's like, oh, well, what separates them from you and I and normal people? Well, those are the people that were okay with taking a risk because they believed in whatever it was. So I feel like, you're very much on the right track in that regard. I mean, everything carries a risk. Engaging in any sort of activism really opens you up to a lot of unsafe avenues for your future. But if that's the point, like it's meant to deter you from speaking up and doing the right thing so that the people who want to take advantage of society can go ahead and do so at their will. So it takes that. I'm trying to remember how to quote myself here, and coffee is not kicked in quick enough. I think I said a while back, it was so many people, that was it. So many people want to harvest from the Garden of Freedom without tending to it. And those are usually the people I found that are very quick to criticize the risk taking. So I just want to see what you think about that.
No, I think that's right. I think my grandparents are children of World War II. They survived the Holocaust, and most of their family didn't. And they were very instrumental in raising me. My grandpa was very taken with World War II history. And one of the things that he always talked to me about, I have memories of these conversations at lots of different points, is that it was the height of culture at the time that the Holocaust took place. That, the Nazis went through Europe and collected some of our greatest pieces of art and didn't destroy it because there was something about, I don't know, whatever makes us human, whatever that spark is about what we already know when we're in alignment about how we want to live, about how we want to interact with one another, about how we want to be in community together, that did exist, but yet also these human atrocities happened. So I will say that I've spent an 11-year legal career representing people that have done things that we as a society have deemed to be morally abhorrent. And I think that some of those people are good people, whatever that might mean. And I am honored that they have trusted me to stand with them in court when we're fighting for them. I have also represented plaintiffs in major police brutality cases, and I've been exposed to some pretty egregious acts of power that I thought I had the muscles for this. And I will say that I have been challenged by the surge, the proximity to cruelty, the seeing that empty behind somebody's eyes before they just open a can of some sort of chemical agent on a crowd of people, on you, on there's something that I'm really struggling with words for. I don't know if that's you were getting at too, that it seems like on some level we're still both struggling with, like, what is that, and I will say too that simultaneously with what happened in Minneapolis is you're confronted with this proximity to cruelty, and you are also standing next to a stranger who has never met you, who gets gassed along with you. And while there is chemical agent in their eyes, they cannot see. The gut reaction is to just grab for you and make sure that you're safe and protected, and in some way, whatever left they have to share with you. And once you see that in a person also, it's hard to not, at least for me, want to give everything in my physical and professional and whatever else kind of small amount of power I have on this planet to protect what that is too, even if I don't have the words for it in either direction. I don't know if that's an answer to your question.
No, I mean, it's the whole point, like, this isn't an interview, and we were talking about that a little bit before, is that this is just all things that move a conversation along organically. Like, this is just like, we would maybe be having this conversation with or without the microphones going. So everything's on limits, I guess. And there's no wrong answers. I love tangents. I love them.
I love it too. Our neurodivergent brains.
I literally have 4 screens in front of me spread across 3 devices because I need to have one for notes and one for looking things up and 2 for recording and like all of this. I am so scattered on tangents that Literally, I'm stalling right now trying to remember what the hell I was going to... Okay, so the grains of sand that make up the beach thing, there are no little me's. I just want to add on to what you were saying. The little you that can do this, as you were trying to say, like your whatever small effort you can put in, is all of us being grains of sand on that beach. And no one grain of sand saying that, well, I am the beach. That really got us through this. And I'm kind of doing some like risk mitigation math here in my head right now about how much I want to talk about some of this stuff. I'm preaching to the choir on you. I'm speaking more to the people listening. We're in a situation where it doesn't matter what's legal or not. They are using, and by they, the federal government,
paramilitary.
Yeah, the cosplay triots.
The cosplay triots. I love that.
A lot of the legal system right now is using detainment as punishment and deterrence, even though they can't make it stick. They're still gonna come at you. So it doesn't matter if what we were doing was legal or not. There's still repercussions to going out and talking about all of this stuff that we did during Metro Surge. But I'm starting to meter a little bit out. And I never really recorded anything I did because I wasn't in it for the glory. And that's actually why this podcast stalled for a long time, is I just wouldn't talk about it. And it was the forefront of my attention. So it's like, well, I'll shelve this podcast. Anyways, I'm rambling.
No, I deeply see that. That I had that too. I've self-selected into becoming a lawyer. So what that naturally means is I believe in the tools of the law. I might believe in learning them to assist people when they get into trouble. But at some level, I've built an entire existence on the fact that I think that the system can be used for good. And I've been deeply challenged, and that's been forefront of my brain. And we just wrapped a podcast where we were talking about how to improve the lives of lawyers. But I deeply see you in what you just said, where I had one thing on my brain and it wasn't the thing that I'm supposed to be recording a conversation about. And that's just wasn't where I wanted to be having a conversation. I wanted to be having this conversation about how, at least when I personally took some chemical agents to the face, I was standing behind whatever yellow line they delineated for, if you're here and you're peaceful, in theory, there should be no consequence. So to your point about not following the law, the rules change, the goalposts change. It's just how scared somebody on the other side is of what you're saying and the intensity of what you're saying with it. Right. And that's the basis of this country.
They want to make an example of anyone who stands up and dares to go against them, which is the risk mitigation I'm talking about. I'll summarize in just saying, like, that look in their eyes before they unleash the tear gas. I have been incredibly fortunate. Well, I've seen a different response. There's that dead in their eyes, but I see the math going on, because there's been a few times where I don't know how I didn't get tear gassed or shot, because I was very quick to help people in the streets. I'll leave it vague like that. And there's one time in particular where I think it was like 5 or 6 of them. They had the nerve, the audacity to abduct someone outside of a church on a Sunday morning. Really, when I started screaming to them about the unholiness of the acts that they were doing, and especially on a Sunday, I watched the deadness stop, and then you could see the math going on. Who is this large guy yelling at them about how God can see through the masks? And they ended up backing down, but I thought I was going to get the shit knocked out of me and all sorts of fun stuff. But, it's the weird thing where you go into that and, like, you're not even thinking about the consequences. Like, for me, I'm not even thinking about the consequences in the moment. I'm not even thinking about recording it, because my dumbass should have been, just for my own protection, legally speaking, because I never laid a hand on them, and I didn't, walk towards them past a certain point. But, like, every time there were different times where, like, I saw them trying to abduct a Native American unhoused person, and
that to me, the number of Native people that got abducted during Metro Surge, I think, is a special kind of disgusting that we haven't even dived into fully yet in our history. Yeah.
Oh, that's a reckoning that is hundreds of years overdue. But watching the look, there's this, it's almost like watching somebody in a trance. Like they're in this trance where they feel like they're in control, but they've got this like well-oiled operation in their head, and they're going to do it. And, we're like living out our action movie fantasy by doing this. It's this deadness in the eyes. It's so strange. And that's all you can see is this deadness. And the most you'll get is when you get them to switch on, it turns to either rage or confusion.
That is beautiful. I also, one of the things that you just said about, like, we're joking, not joking about calling cosplay, but these are people that on some level you would think that their heroes would be the Army Rangers that have been deployed overseas 6 times to fight. And that has been, I don't know the right words for this, but we talk about challenges of how to reach people that are not already engaged in the conversation. It's when you're confronted with somebody who's actually the hero that you're aspiring to be, saying the thing that in theory is your values, is why in theory you're standing in this parking lot or on this street dressed up in very expensive taxpayer funded equipment for grandmas, Minnesota grandmas that are out here with, signs, with peaceful people, with people that just want, Minnesota's a place we just come to be left alone on some level. Like, we're not looking for trouble here. And you came here with trouble, and then you hear from somebody who says to you, I am what you aspire to be, and let me tell you what you're not understanding. And I love that switch on. It's, why is it rage? Like, why is that so threatening? That when you hear...
Yeah, men are emotionally broken.
No, tell me. I need to understand.
Men are emotionally broken. We have our spirits broken by this society. This is one of the things I really hope to undo with this project, or at least, chip away at. And I realize I'm taking a kitchen spoon to a mountain here. That men are really only allowed to have 2 emotions. You're allowed to have, 2.5. You're allowed to have anger and numbness. Those are the only acceptable emotions. If you get too happy, you're allowed to be happy to a point. If you're too happy, that's problematic. If you express any sort of what has been deemed feminine, which is a whole other ball to untangle, that any of the quote unquote softer emotions are feminine, you're only allowed those 2 outlets. So when the other stuff boils over and then you're ashamed of it, it's going to be channeled into anger and rage and shame and all these other negatives, instead of just letting yourself feel an emotional sense of right and wrong, an emotional sense of caring about somebody. Because caring about somebody, God forbid you do that, is feminine, which is in this whole ranked gender system we have, is bullshit, by the way, that anything feminine is below you. That's why we're broken. We are fundamentally blocked off from our emotions. We are discouraged. Going to therapy. That's defeat. That's a woman's thing. At any given time, I'm at least in 2 therapies, for different things. And one is not for just me. It's about learning how to work with others and connect with your feelings. And like, I have no shame in saying this. Like, there is a point where, for example, in the Rise and Remember festival that just happened, like, we did this funeral procession for all the people who were stolen by police violence into the Say Their Name cemetery. And once I got there, there was like this string group playing violins and all sorts of stuff. And I probably cried for 10 minutes, and I have no shame in that. Those were stuck emotions that were freed up and coming out. And the fact that I can connect with that I have the security, the inner security to connect with that could have very easily turned into rage otherwise. I could have been like, well, fuck these police. I need to go do something about this. But no, I let this turn into emotions that can be processed, and then that allows me to take being upset and turn it into motivation rather than violence.
I mean, your project is incredibly important because nothing is more dangerous than the fact that most of the people in power, just statistically, are not allowed to feel anything other than rage or numbness.
Mm-hmm. I want to walk around and just slap men upside the head when they're on their business, like in mass. Just like walk around, just like to the point where my hand will be purple when I get home. Just going, hey, quit buying into the myth that you have to beg other men for your masculinity to be approved on a regular basis. Like, find that in yourself. Don't go around. It's the weakest thing. They try and be, I'm so tough. And it's like, who are you trying to convince of this? Because if you knew it, then you wouldn't have to try and convince anybody of it. But you are so deeply insecure about it. I'm talking about other men. You as men are so deeply insecure about it that you have to constantly run around trying to like make payments on this subscription plan of masculinity. And it's fucking ridiculous.
It really is. It's damaging. And I mean, I think we all have that male figure in your life. You know, I won't go further than that, but everybody has that male figure in your life where you just wish for something better for them. Mm-hmm. So so I'm raising a little man and I'm having a lot of fun doing it. So what are the tools that as a parent I need to make sure I'm giving him as he navigates how to grow up into a person in the world?
I am also a parent, and I can tell you right now there is no right answer, and you are going to, and we're just going to go ahead and just write this thing off as that we're going to have an explicit tag on this, so don't mind my language. You're going to fuck up until you get better at not fucking up, and that's how every parent does it. And I wasn't able to see that until I was an adult raising my own children. That's what my parents did too. They took their best guess. They tried to be informed, but I threw curveballs at them constantly that nobody would ever be ready for. And, you know, every kid is going to do that to their parent. Some of the shit that you got to deal with as a parent is never going to be written down in a parenting book. But as far as looking back in my own experiences, I grew up, and this is something I've talked about a lot in this podcast, and it's been a while, so I'll say it again. I grew up around strong women and secure men. And I never felt once that it was a sign of weakness that my dad could connect with something softer and my grandpa could be the toughest human being I ever know, but also be an unending reserve, a well of kindness to anybody. Even if he didn't like him, he was kind. And then I look at people like my uncle who it was very, well educated and deep in philosophical thought. I never looked at this stuff and said, well, they're not proving their manhood, so that's invalid. I looked at this is what strength looks like. And then the women in my life when I was growing up they'd all survived things that, at the time it's just like, that's kind of normal. Sometimes you have an abusive spouse. Like the grandpa I talk about is not my biological grandpa, but he's always been my grandpa because my biological grandpa was one of those people that only had rage and numbness and was permanently stuck on rage when he was drunk. So, I look at that. I look at the stuff my mom went through. My parents got married early and are young and divorced early. Just wasn't meant to be. But I would see how they just moved through life in a way that didn't make me think that I had to compete for my sense of manhood, and I didn't have to be belittled by the success of the women around me. And I think really this is why I really think the matriarchy thing we need to have a shift, because I've grown up in matriarchal family structure, and it made me a better person. It made me less insecure. It made me seek
my validation inward. And don't get me wrong, I went through a period as a teenager, I think we all did, where my validation was primarily external, but like it just taught me now that I didn't need to compete for my existence. I could just be. And that's a big part of it.
It's beautiful. I was around matriarchal strong women, but I was also around the kind of masculinity where you always have to prove your worth, and that worth is complicated, that one, somebody outside of you, you're talking about externalities, is deciding what makes you worthy of insert whatever here. So I grew up with that, and I made a lot of choices. I mean, I'm like the historical, dated all the wannabe rock stars, dated, they're going to make it so big one day. They're going to make it so big one day. They just need my support, and
Right.
I say that in a silly way, but I also say that I was historically always looking for something outside of myself to find some sort of I don't know, permission, invitation that I was good enough. And that's the other impact. That's the other impact of the going between numb and rage, because you are raising children, whether or not there are other men, whether or not there are other women, whether or not they're non-binary, you are raising children to believe that if you need permission to be of value and of worth, then they need permission to be of value and of worth.
Yes.
I want to not be that parent for my kiddo. And that's what's, I say all the time. We did an episode on our podcast about what is a mentor. And my podcast partner asked me who my mentor is. And I said, it's my 3-year-old, because I hear myself tell him things. And then I realized those are my values. There's a reason I'm parenting that way. And that's what I want to aspire to be too, as an example to him.
Yeah. I mean,
so it sounds like you're doing that for your family.
We have this way of talking about it in our house about, it's the second priority. The first one is keeping them safe, but the second priority as a parent for me, my job is to build a functional adult. And a lot of the choices I make are, I constantly have to keep myself in check. Like, I know it'd be easier to do this for them, but am I building a responsible, functional adult? And the hardest thing for me is to get out of their way and let them learn through mistakes. And that's been like my biggest challenge. I was a helicopter parent for a very long time, and I watched how it kind of held my kids back a little bit, and I had to land the helicopter. And that's, one of the latest evolutions of parenting for me is learning how to land that helicopter, because that is a hard one to land once you get it in flight.
I can see that. Did you have helicopter parents yourself?
No, quite the opposite. And I think that was my rebellion. It's like, I didn't want, I felt a certain way about how I was raised. And I thought, my parents would have been a little bit more involved. And, it's just a product of the time. I'm a kid of the 70s, and it's, I grew up in the 80s, and they literally, there's so many jokes about this on the internet, but it's true. They had to make commercials. It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your kid is? And it's like, because they didn't care. You came back in one piece. That's how they were raised. It's like, you're fine. If you lived, okay, great. That made you stronger, I guess, because they didn't care. And I don't think that it wasn't that they didn't care about us. They were like, they'll figure it out. So I think I went the other way with it, as a lot of us did. But then I realized, it's like maybe there's a balance to be found where you can build self-reliant children without leaving them to the wolves,
I love that. Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of mentors, was there any of the people in your life that were role models that got you to like look at getting into the legal profession, or is it just sort of like this is what's important to me, what can I do to further and make a career out of what's important to me? Like, how did all that happen?
Yeah. So no, I'm not from a lawyer family. I didn't have anybody in my family. My dad's cousin was a lawyer, and he met with me, and we got closer in the process of being lawyers. But um, no, I didn't have that. And I didn't think I wanted to be a lawyer. I went to college, I studied philosophy, and philosophy taught me about how to think, how to approach conversations, how to think, and how to talk to somebody who does not think about the things the same way that you think about them, which I loved it. And I didn't know what I was going to do next. I did know, however, I had a really violent thing happen to me when I was in college. And inevitably, I think I explored healing a lot of that through some of those conversations in school. Um, and that found its way into a few different odd jobs of trying different things out where I was very anti death penalty. And then I tried law school to see if I'd like it. I got a scholarship to University of San Francisco. I figured I'm living out here. Let me see if I like law school. And I fell in love with law school. And I had an incredible criminal law professor. And it evolved from there. I connected with the right people. I can't put it any other way than the way that my brain works and the way that I approach things and the way it is what law school is. I just was like, this is the puzzle I've been waiting to work on. And I didn't know that. I liked law school more than I liked being a lawyer. Being a lawyer is different than being a law student. But I transferred to Georgetown for the criminal defense and prisoner advocacy clinic based on a mentor, Steve Schatz, is a professor at University of San Francisco, and he heavily encouraged me to do that. Then when I was in law school, I there was a professor, Eloise, blanking on her name right now. I'll have to edit this out. I had an education law professor who felt very strongly that women weren't applying for federal clerkships and that she wanted to see that change. She herself had been a federal clerk to some of the most powerful people on the bench, including Justice Sotomayor. And she just wanted to see more of that. She took an interest in me. She thought I could be a good candidate. I didn't know what a federal clerkship was before she came into my life and told me I should be applying to them. I applied. When I met my judge that I moved out here to Minneapolis to work for, federal judge here in town, I knew from our interview he was a mentor, and he has always been. He's an incredibly important person in my life. Similar to our conversation today, in the middle of the interview, he's a rare coin collector, and he had all these coins on his desk. And I think like mid question, talk about tangents, I was like, I'm sorry, but I can't really engage with anything else we're talking about. What is going on this desk? And we just very much approached the law in similar ways from there. And on paper, we're really different. He was a career prosecutor before he took the bench. I cannot ever be a person who would use my education and skills to put a human being in a cage and go to sleep at night. That's just not for me. But we were able to engage in conversations, thinking differently about similar issues, and in many senses thinking the same way. Like we had the same idea of where we wanted to go. We just maybe had different ideas of how to get there. Then I got lost. Then I went to big law, took the paycheck, was miserable, but learned a ton and met some cool people. And I did have a great mentor, which is why I bring that up, in big law. His name is Paul Hines. And I love the way he lawyers. And I will emulate the way that he lawyers and the way that he mentors and teaches people for the duration of my career. So big shout out to Paul Hines.
Very cool.
Yeah.
One thing that, like, you kind of scooted right past it, but I find fascinating. Okay, so you went to school for philosophy, and I want to ask you, now that you said this, I just run my mouth on the internet with opinions, and
Love it.
That's a lot of the stuff I post. So I'm curious, for someone who is talking from experience and not mostly out of their ass, I made a reel that was talking about how people often bundle justice, legality, ethics, and morals as the same thing. And I feel like they're four completely different concepts that have some overlap. And I'm curious, with your philosophy background, what's your take on that?
First of all, I saw that reel and I loved it. And I would also say we're all just talking out of our ass. Nobody's more nobody's more qualified to talk out of their ass than anybody else. I think I agree with you. This might not be a full answer to your question, but one of the way that our justice system works is that it is my job to show up as the most prepared person in the room and fight for my client's story and bring my client's story out, which is to put the government to its burden to prove its story against my client. I have one client. I have one goal. It simplifies the world in a very serious way. And is that justice? I don't know. Do mistakes get made all the time in both directions? Absolutely. Is it the best experiment that we have so far and we call it justice? Yes. But I don't know. I don't know. Somebody said this to me yesterday, and I think it's beautiful. We're all just people. We're all just people, and we're trying. So what's legal is what a group of people sat down together in a room and wrote down and passed. And in theory, we've elected some of them to be there. So that's how the people get their say in that sense. Justice happens in our system, at least. This is probably not how you're defining it in your reel, but in that courtroom setup I just described, there's a lot wrong with it. It is very problematic to me, especially these days. You can make whatever editing decisions for mitigating risk, that the Department of Justice is being weaponized to go after Jean E. Carroll. That to me is...
That is a full hijack.
That is a full hijack. It's also, in theory, that is our American system. That is our Department of Justice. So what do we as the people want to see happening? Is it true that she won her case? She proved her point in court. She was sexually assaulted by the President of the United States. She was raped by the President of the United States. And now she's being investigated by the Department of Justice. What does that mean? I know here in Minnesota, this is reported on by the New York Times, so I'm not betraying any confidences, but a big reason why our U.S. Attorney's Office has essentially been emptied of anybody who has experience, has been working hard for their community, has been in many senses a public servant. And it's tough for me to say positive things about prosecutors, but I will say it about a lot of these guys and women. They were told after Renee Good was murdered that they were to investigate Renee Good's widow. And that did not seem like the oath that they took to do justice. And they made personal, professional decisions based on standing up to that oath. So I'm not answering your question. I don't know if there is an answer to your question, but...
No, I think it was more of a prompt than a question. I really want to hear what you think about it. I don't need your answer to validate anything I've said. I'm genuinely curious as a person who I recognize has a exponentially more full knowledge of what law is, and coupled with like the starting with philosophy. I think that's I feel like that's almost something that should be encouraged if you're going to go into anything that has the possibility to alter someone's life like that.
If you are responsible, if you have self-selected and put yourself in a position where you are responsible for working for people, I think it is really important to get proximate to people. And it is really, oaths matter, words matter, oaths matter. There's a reason we ask for them in this country. A prosecutor is required to do justice, not to get convictions. That needs to matter. But then we have to also engage in many senses in the reel that you put out there. And what is justice? What does justice look like for us? What do we as the people want to see in our system of government, in our system? And Maybe this is the best way. So the area of philosophy that I ended up writing my thesis in, that I fell in love with, were the pragmatists, which is essentially John Dewey's idea, Dewey of the Dewey Decimal System, that nothing exists as an abstract. Democracy is the act of participating in democracy. Education is the act of learning and participating in your education. So all the time I'm thinking about that, especially if, I'm sure we're going to talk more about activism. Like, is this how we want to live? I think is really what it comes down to. And I don't think most people are happy.
Yeah, I think
Whatever
that's
that
fair.
means.
And I think we've been tricked into thinking that our happiness has to be done a certain way. It has to be these hurdles and goalposts that are set up in society. It has to be exactly this way, or you're technically not happy, or you're weird for feeling happy.
Well, you also said before, what you said before too, about you're only allowed to feel a certain amount of happy. And then
Yes.
once you cross that threshold, that you're breaking the rules. That's not allowed. That's indulgent. You know, that's lazy. How could you be so how could you choose to go hang out in the woods instead of, buy into insert whatever corporate.
And if you're happy with very few possessions or material items, then, well, you're just lazy.
Look at your neighbor next door. They've got a insert whatever here. Don't you need
Yeah.
that too?
Right, right. Well, you don't have the newest car, so you're not gonna you're not gonna be able to do this, this, and that. And it's like, the one I have is like 12 years old. It's fine. So the question, and this is something you had started to talk about, and we kind of moved past, but I don't go back to it. There's like a pressure for result, and I'm super duper paraphrasing. There's a pressure for result within the legal system, and I am curious in a philosophical sense if you feel, because I'm going to ask you, okay, I'm going to say this as an I feel statement, because I just realized I was just about to put words in your mouth, and that is bullshit. I feel like there is, from what I've seen happen from our justice system, that there is a pressure for results. There's certain cases that prosecutors won't take because they think, well, I'm probably not going to win that one. So instead of getting things out in the light, instead of getting things into, hey, at least we tried, it's either dropped, or there is a pressure to convict that people who are innocent are being put into the carceral system, that had no business, and some of them lose decades of their lives to it. And I feel like, what is your take on what I see as pressure to get certain results?
I think it's the problems are all in the soup, right? We can't separate it out. So we have poverty in this country, period. We have racism in this country, period. We have institutions that are only providing resources to certain subsects of people and completely disenfranchising other sects of people. And then we're shocked when 19-year-olds are out in the street carjacking. We're all like, how did this happen? But how did this happen? The pandemic happened and school became remote, but you didn't make sure any of these kids had a computer. You didn't make sure any of these kids had access to food. You didn't make sure any of these kids had access to the internet. They got bored. They entertained themselves. People capitalized on that. Now they're out in the streets causing crime. So everything gets murky the more you dig into it. And I do think, on the results point, I think a lot of defenders, public defenders, defense attorneys, when they are behind closed doors talking about prosecutors, they talk about how there's this like very view of black or white. This person did something wrong, period. This person, and that just doesn't make sense. It doesn't comport with what we know about human nature. That doesn't comport with you or me right now. We're all mixed bags. We've all made mistakes. We've all acted outside of our integrity. We've all fucked up. And what does it mean to create a system that can handle the fact that people are complicated and that people fuck up, and that also there's deep need for resources and trauma that needs to be, broken people do broken things. And on the results point, I just think that it's so easy when there is a power differential to get your conviction. It's very easy. I mean, it can be black and white. Wherever you draw the circle, every single crime, the first thing I do when I get a new case or a new client is I look up the jury instructions, because the jury instructions are, at the end of the day, if we're taking this case to trial, every element that the government has to prove or that I have to poke holes in so that they can't prove it, that the jury has to find. Depending on where you draw the circle, you'll prove your elements. It just depends on your choice. And the prosecutor has all of that power in our system about where to draw that circle. So I think, unfortunately, that when you look a lot like the person that's a prosecutor, they might change where they draw that circle. And when you don't, and when it's really hard for us to engage with, I don't know, somebody who grew up really differently than you did, really, really differently, so much so that it takes a backbend, it takes getting uncomfortable, it takes really engaging with why this happened. How did we get here for this particular human being? And one, there's resource issues. Two, how uncomfortable are you willing to get? And I think you self-select into certain jobs based on how uncomfortable you're willing to get. And more importantly, I think that our system does not encourage getting uncomfortable.
Yeah, and another thing I've said so much, I'm just get it tattooed so I can just like show it on my arm instead of saying it anymore. Discomfort.
I know a guy.
Discomfort is the fertile soil in which seeds of progress are seeds of progress are planted. Like, you have to be able to get discomfort or uncomfortable. Like, fertilizer is poop. You have to be able to dig in the poop and be uncomfortable with it in order to get growth. And so few people are willing to be uncomfortable because we've all gotten this little stupid anxiety rectangle feeding us our echo chamber, and we don't have to be uncomfortable to get through the day. And I think that's a privilege and a luxury that a lot of people realize they don't have. So when it's threatened, they really, the pearls get clutched and they get angry, instead of just letting themselves be uncomfortable and processing their way through it.
And then that comes back to what you were saying, where you're only allowed numbness and rage. So in a situation where we have all the soup, we have all the things that we've been talking about, and then you are in a place of discretion, and your discretion in where you draw the circle and how uncomfortable you're willing to get, and the only range of, range of crayons you're allowed in as you draw the circle is rage or numbness, then pick one. And then we've got retribution, or we've got complete apathy to somebody. And prosecutors never get to meet your client by the rules. I had a situation where a prosecutor spoke to my client in the bathroom while she was washing her hands, and I was pissed about it. And there was a lot of back and forth on how we were going to handle that in front of the court, because by the rules, the minute you are represented by counsel, nobody should be having a conversation with you other than through your lawyer. And that's for the protection of the person. But what that also does naturally translate into is that this isn't a real person as you're holding their life in their hand. So yeah, I think inevitably most of death row, as we know in the States, I think it's still 32 states that have the death penalty in this country, is filled with young Black boys who did commit some sort of crime when they were, between the ages of 18 and 23 years old, and have an IQ of roughly 70. And that's part of our justice system that I think is hard to confront. And then we talk about the other side. What's the crime that happened? And I'm not trying to belittle that either. There are real victims when violent crime happens. I have been the victim of a violent crime.
This is, and the thing is that this, people like to say, well, this is all broken. This isn't broken at all. This is intentional. This is working exactly the way it's supposed to. And again, just the same way, and we're gonna probably title this, I'm not your lawyer, this isn't legal advice. In the same way, I'm gonna make the disclaimer that this is my opinion and certainly not fact. But in my opinion, we had a chance when we set this country up to right along a lot of the foundational flaws that were present in the way that the world did its governments. And instead, we perpetuated a lot of the worst ones. A lot of the stuff,
100%.
yeah, a lot of the foundations of what we would call democracy was sourced from Greek, was sourced from the natives here. But we brought along some pretty big, like, we really codified exploitation. And, Abigail Adams was trying to get her husband to bring a sense of equality and justice into how all of that stuff was done. And, he ignored her. And here we are.
Not only did he ignore her, but I think was having, I mean, if you agree with John Hamilton's take on the situation, was like off running around with lots of other, part of why we codified it that way is there was just this view of women are commodities.
Yep.
People of color are commodities.
Yep.
Natives are commodities. They are not people. So if we define people to be one particular type of the way a human thinks, looks, acts, and talks, and that range is only numbness and rage, then it's really unsurprising, to exactly your point, why then we're left with a system that is operating exactly as it is designed to operate.
Yeah, and like the foundation of capital, the capitalism that nobody really talks about in a wider sense, is that human capital, it started really in the way that we do it here because of slavery. That's why we have capitalism. It's the idea of harvesting this excess production, or however you want to call it, this excess labor. But it's trying to treat human beings as a crop. And it's all the current system, in my opinion, is similar to the weather cycle, where in order to keep this system, this unsustainable system of growth going, you have to force people, to strong arm people to do your bidding. And you do this by making being unhoused a threat. You make it by having to pay to exist. And if you can't pay, then you can't exist. You've got this, it makes this poverty to prison cycle. And you get into prison and then you get out and then it's harder to get a job. So it's this constant stream of, once you're down, we're not just going to it's not that we can't kick you when you're down. No, we encourage kicking you while you're down, because then you provide deterrence to the workers in your labor to go, okay, you know what? It could be worse. And I think if you really wanted to solve a problem of crimes being committed, you need to look at making sure people's basic needs are met. You're talking about the low IQ. The foundations for a higher understanding and a higher way of thinking are there, but we are failed by an educational system that is deeply underfunded and underprioritized, especially in urban situations, especially in low-income situations. Your schools are funded by the property taxes, which means that inherently the fancier, richer areas are going to get better educations. Like, all of this is flawed, and it creates this system that just funnels people into poverty. And you create, okay, well, we got around the slavery being outlawed by allowing prison labor. Okay, let's get people in prisons. Let's make marijuana a Schedule 1 narcotic so we can put people away for life for being caught 3 times with weed. That's not on accident.
No, it's not. That's not an accident. And then I think the parallel is obviously, incarcerating brown people for being brown people is what's going on right now. I think we've even given up. That's why I'm so offended by what's happening right now, specifically at Whipple, specifically at Delaney, as 2 microcosmic examples, but it's happening everywhere. If you dig deeper in your neighborhood, you will find it. You will find a crowd that, if you wanted to go join, you can and should go join it, to say that we don't want to live this way, because we have private prison systems, publicly traded private prison systems, that we know are gross and that we were starting to close as a means for, the Leavenworth private prison closed and then reopened as a immigration detention facility. So things we recognized as a problem that we had no partisan divisions on, that we were already working towards. Now it's just okay for literally picking people up in the street with their children, putting them in cages, forcing them into into labor for the benefit of public traded companies. I mean, this is disgusting. And then I think when you say that out loud, people look at you like you're wearing a tinfoil hat. Like there's just no way this could possibly be happening. And it's just, why are we not all willing to get uncomfortable with the fact that we have been, I like the way you put it, like we are crops for these multi-billion, if not trillion-dollar enterprises. And there's something very jarring when you look somebody in the eyes and say, you too, come hang out with us. Like, come be upset with us about the fact that this is happening. And the answer is no, there's something wrong with you. You're homeless, or you're incarcerated, or you're this, or you're that, or you're something different than me. And I didn't do that thing that you did. They're illegal. I hear a lot, or something a troll says to you a lot on the internet. I get told to take my medication a lot, which, by the way, I do. It's just so silly, where I'm just like, oh, why is what we're saying crazy?
I've made a couple of reels now about comments and what people feel entitled to say in comment sections. And I start with about 15 minutes worth of content, and I whittle it down to 3. And some of the stuff I leave out, I'm really unkind in my true thoughts about these people. I think one of the things that I put up, I'm like, you guys come into the comment section and spray the diarrhea of your thoughts all over the wall. That was the polite version. I was talking about the fact that, like, so they'll make lots of, they'll find like one thing. I think the way I've described it is like, and if one of you manages to splat a whole turd onto the wall, you'll pick out the choicest kernels of corn out of it and ad nauseum just post these over and over again, because you don't have an original thought in their head. Like, they don't. They're just like, I've got this canned answer that somebody gave me loaded up and ready to go. And if you're a woman, they're going to take shots at your appearance. They're going to take shots at, oh, you're hysterical and this and that. And it's like, it's interesting too, because I don't have my face on my icon for any of my social media. It's the podcast logo. So a lot of times I'll get mistaken for a woman, and then they go into my account and you can see their tone change entirely, and they start attacking me for different reasons. Because I say some pretty, like, I'm pretty rapid fire on calling out patriarchal bullshit. So they assume anyone that would call out the patriarchy is a woman, just to put a fine point on it. I'm not passable in thought nor appearance. It's just they don't care.
But why not? Why don't they care? Because it's so important to me that we engage people in the conversation that are not already part of the conversation. And
oh yeah,
they care about something. This is what I should be really on Instagram specifically. I did not have an Instagram account until January 12th, really, of this year. I had a loose one that really somebody else was mostly operating for our podcast, and I was barely touching it. And then I took a lift home from the courthouse. My partner and I share a car, and I didn't have the car that day. And the Lyft driver just really got hysterical with me about this horrific experience of coming to pick up this woman, and just that woman getting trampled by ice, hurt. She's got a very small child. He guesstimated a 1-year-old child. And I didn't know what else to do, because who do you call when it is the government that is committing these abductions? So I was just like, well, I'm going to go to the public square. And I posted this video. And what was so funny to me, because we're not that far away from January 12th at this moment. Today, as we're recording this, it's May 31st. I have no idea what day it'll be when this gets put out into the world.
Couple of days from now.
The first couple of days from now. So yeah. June. But the immediate response was just like, she's lying. That's the first, like, just, I have no credibility. If I'm saying these things, there must be some, and I mean, I'm closer to 40 than 30, perimenopausal mom. I'm not looking for followers, like I don't like Instagram. I think Instagram is where we're all creating evidence against ourselves. I say that as a trial attorney. I just think the revolution needs every tool.
Yep.
But that was the funnier thing to me, where it was like, this can't be true, because there's no way they would take a child. So that's the first line. And it's funny, the goalpost moves on the criticism, right?
Oh, yeah.
Now there's no question, only 6 months later, that of course there are children in these detention facilities. We have an entire facility that's just for children. We have a hunger strike going on at Delaney to try to get children out of cages. We know about, some of the headline kids that just to get this out. So now you can't say I'm making it up. So what's the next thing you say? Like,
it's all deflection. Yeah. And it's,
I need to take my meds.
I'm writing this down because there's, as you go, I have answers to your questions. So
I love it. I need them.
I am so scattered I have to write things down. So here, I'm going to go over my list here. They care. They do care. You're right. They care, but they don't care about our details. It's the same mechanism that has men going on to dating apps, and they'll never read a profile. Like, a dating app could say, like, a woman looking for another woman, and they'd be like, hey, what's up? It's like you don't, the most basic things that they're put it like right there in the first like sentence of a dating profile. They won't read it. They don't care about the details. They care about ejecting their feelings on other people. They don't care about the facts. They really don't. So they're going to just chase whatever emotional impulse they have. And it's funny, like, these guys are not allowed to be emotionally connected to their complete range of emotions, let's just say, but they are so emotionally driven. Like, what they call hysterical should be called testerical. Okay, so hysterical is related to having a womb, like a hysterectomy. They remove the womb, stuff like that. So the source is that, it's women are inherently unstable. And it's like, no, I think, and I can't even take credit for it. I think I heard it from like someone like Dan Savage or something, where that word should really be like testerical. Like, you guys you're not connected with your emotions in a way that lets you properly process and express them, yet everything you've done is emotionally led. It's not led by logic or facts. And
you're only painting with 2 crayons. I mean, come on. Let us make better art.
Yes. And then you asked who you're going to call, and I think you found this out. You call your neighbors. Like, our neighbors are the reason why we have video of Liam being detained. We have video because our neighbors are incredible. Some of our neighbors, like Nick, I'm going to not say his last name just because I haven't asked him if I can talk about him on this. But our neighbor Nick is tracking flights, and he was able to get video of Delta collaborating with ICE to put Liam on the plane to bring him into Texas. Like, you call your neighbors, because when the government isn't going to help, this is a government that has forgotten that is for the people, by the people, of the people, and the people are still here. So when the government gets hijacked by these bad actors, as it has been, and arguably has been since the beginning, but now, like, it's just all out in the open, you call your neighbors. Because in the end, the government is just a homeowners association that's lost its goddamn mind. Like, we all got together and said, well, let's do something. Well, by the way, that's socialism. The fact that we have a federal government at all, it's socialism. We're already there. Quit trying to make it a bad word. We have roads that you pay for. We have fire departments you pay for. We have army that you pay for. You've been tricked into thinking that health insurance shouldn't be a public utility like the frickin' fire department. But that's a whole other tangent. It's all us. It's always been us. And we've let them
divide us,
force everyone to forget that. Yeah, like, they're like, well, it's the government. What can you do? Well, the government should be of us, by us, for us. So if the people who are at the steering wheel are doing what they're doing, we always can fall back on each other, because there's more of us than there are of the government. The government was just there to make it a little bit more easier and streamlined. It's a fucking homeowners association. I wish more people would realize that.
Do you know that I went to war with my homeowners association, so this is very fitting.
Oh, if you were in person, I'd give you a high five. I have very strong feelings about the concept of having to rent your own property back from the homeowners association.
Yeah. Anyway, yes, a million times yes.
So,
but I derailed you. Sorry, you have.
Oh no. That was pretty much it. The only other thing is what I written down before that, and I was going to get back to that at some point. There never should be a financial incentive to incarcerate. Like the whole private prison system.
100,000,000%. And also, why is there no financial incentive to invest in our kids? But
Right.
it makes me crazy.
Why are we not doing like, if you're having inmates work at all, why are we not doing that in terms of job skill building and trying to do these pipelines that gets people a job waiting for them the day they get out? Why are we not working on rehabilitation? Why are we not working on mental health care and proper medical care and looking at like a universal basic income would probably drop our prisons down to about a quarter of what they have. Because people don't go up one day and say, I would like to fuck people up and risk imprisonment. I would like to make the world a better place or a worse place just so I can eat. They don't go out and say, I would like to, I mean, some people do, and now they're president. They don't say, I would like to go out and cause suffering. They just want to make their basic needs met. And sometimes that means loss of property for other people. But you know what? We all end up doing what we have to do to survive. So if we take that, if we take that basic needs away from people, yeah, of course they're going to do whatever they need to do to, like, oh yeah, I'm just going to quietly lay down in a corner and die. No.
But on that, and with your project, those basic needs include mental health support.
Yes.
Include really reaching people at their trauma, because we are equipping these kids with zero tools, with nothing, and then expecting everything of them. And we know that the same, well-off, likely white kid who would start fucking up or would start using substances to self-medicate or would start getting into trouble, there are so many pathways for intervention and fancy spas to go and talk about your feelings, and these kids are growing up never feeling safe, never having stability, and never understanding what safety and stability is. And then they're figuring it out. And yeah, they're making mistakes in how we as a society would like to also feel safe. They are absolutely doing that, but they've never felt safe.
Yep. And it's this like divide and conquer shit that keeps perpetuating the system. All of this is part of the same like poverty to prison cycle, is because you're forcing people not to be able to feel. You're forcing people not to be able to deal with their stuff until it comes out in self-medication, like you're saying, or it comes out into acting out, because instead of being upset about something, you're just angry about it. Like, that's another thing. I firmly believe that being angry is a choice. I believe you can't help being upset. Someone can upset you. Something can upset you. And there's not a goddamn thing you can do about it. But what you do with that feeling of being upset, a lot of people default to anger. And it's not like an inherent flaw. It's hard not to default to anger. But I think, again, there's a choice to be made. Do I want to turn this into anger, or do I have the strength to turn this into motivation? In communities that have been historically exploited, there's a strength that can turn being upset into motivation and perseverance that I don't think most people who aren't in those situations could even comprehend, let alone pull in their own, from their own emotional well. I forgot where I was going with this.
I don't know, but I'd love to take it in a different direction. I'm really angry right now. I'm really angry watching what's happening at Delaney. I'm really angry watching the escalation. What we experienced here made me angry as well.
Mm-hmm.
But they did not intentionally target our medics. They did not. I have, I don't want to spread conspiracy theories, especially on your, but I have some concerns. Well, I have some concerns about what people are reporting that are out there about this white mist that's being used. And yes, when we were gassed, we weren't wearing sunscreen and we had a lot of winter clothes on. So maybe it is the same, but it's just a different experience when you've got other like particles on your skin. But seeing that and people saying that this is something, people who were here and people who were here with us at Whipple saying this feels different. makes me really wonder what our government is taking out and using on people that are expressing the values of what it is to be American, whatever aspirationally that is. So when you say anger is a choice, I really appreciate you reminding me about that, because I've been feeling really angry. And when I'm angry, I'm not productive. I'm not thinking straight. I'm not able to do as much, because I'm just sort of in this, I don't know, my brain doesn't work well under that emotion. So I maybe a lot of people feel that way too, where anger is a choice, and then it keeps us from being able to do the things that we're supposed to be doing. It doesn't mean that there isn't a reason to be angry, but
Oh, plenty of reasons to be angry, and I think that's the point. I think we are being manipulated into being angry. I think we're baited. The government is constantly rage baiting us these days, and that's kind of the point. They want us dysregulated so that we can't be dangerous back towards them with solidarity. They want us scattered. They want us divided. They want us rage baited, and they want us just generally less effective.
and it makes you wonder why anybody's response is to be like, that's a good thing. Let them do their job, so I'm just so confused at the division on that level of people, in my opinion, just being very comfortable in their oppression.
Well, okay. So I've lent this book out to somebody, and I'll need to get it to you at some point when I get it back. But there's there's something I put a note in to bring up later. You kind of glanced over it. Your grandparents survived the Holocaust, or someone in your family survived the Holocaust, and I think what's happening right now makes a lot of what happened back then makes sense. How could these people stand idly by? Were they genuinely evil? No, they just didn't want to believe it. They wanted to stick their head in the sand, and they had the luxury and privilege of being able to go, well, you know what? This doesn't affect me. I'm not going to, and then they go back once things get really bad, and you see people justify, like, especially now, you see people justifying retroactively their indifference to cruelty by saying, well, it's the right thing to do. It's like, no, it just hasn't reached you yet. Like, you have not been on the receiving end of it, and you are still in your privilege bubble where you think this is good because they're taking up, the law and order of it all. But these are the same people. Do you know what the killdozer is? Where, okay, so this is something to look up, where the guy got zoned his business, his livelihood. The city tried to buy him out, and when he didn't want to do it, I could be wrong on these details, it's been a minute, they decided to take his easement away, like the street going into his business. So what he did is he took a Komatsu bulldozer and iron plated it and basically leveled the town, and ended up killing himself. And the same people who are like, you just should have complied, you just did this, on the I'm pro-ICE, go back a couple of years behind all this stuff before this is happening, and they see the killdozer guy as a folk hero. And the big difference is oh yeah, he was white. He was white and he was rural. So they can see themselves being affected by the same thing, but they can't see themselves being affected by this because, well, their family came in and did it right. It's like, okay, you ignorant fucks. When my family came over, I'm only third generation. When my family came over, it on average took under a day to immigrate legally. And now it can take a decade. I know a friend of mine who I'm not going to name just for, the whole mitigation of risk thing. A friend of mine came over as a small child, and he's now in his mid-30s, and his family has been trying since he was a kid, and he's continued the fight into adulthood to get even a green card. And he finally got it in his mid-30s. And, like, he's white passing.
I mean, so much on that. Yes.
And I don't think these people realize they are doing it right. These people are showing up to their appointments. They're showing up to the legal process, and they are getting pulled in line at their scheduled legal check-ins.
100%. That's the thing. I think, if I could encapsulate this, I think I always felt that if we got here, we'd all agree. I really felt that way. There's a lot of idealism and naivety in that, but I really felt like, for example, what I said before, the first comment is there's no way they're abducting children. That's the first, there's no way. She's lying about it for, followers, likes, and whatever. There's no way they're doing it. But now that we can all agree that this is what they're doing, why are we still disagreeing on the fact that this is bad? Your gut reaction was there's no way that's happening, right? Like in your biggest troll moment, that was your gut reaction. The one thing that you said that I push back on is at this point, this has impacted everybody. Nobody is not being impacted. And there are a lot of historical reasons and a lot of books that have been written, and people have said it way better than I could ever even attempt to, about why people don't vote in their self-interest. But that there is no way that you are existing in this country and not seeing paramilitary troops using war grade chemicals on fellow civilians, even if you disagree with what those fellow civilians think, say, do, whatever. That's happening to you. That means we've crossed that threshold. Once we've crossed that threshold, it is really hard to put the canister back on. That's happening to you. So it's just a matter of like, how do you want to hand this world off to our next generation?
Right. And I think, and I think that's a fair point. And I want to clarify, I guess, it's not that they think it doesn't affect them because whatever pinch they're feeling, they feel is for the common good. It doesn't negatively affect them in a lasting way.
Yeah.
But it does. Like, we're literally in the middle of watching a Russian asset, and allegedly a Russian asset run our country into the ground more effectively than any other move that was pulled during the Cold War. And they're like, yay, America, I've got my American flag underwear on, and I got my Walmart American flag chair that I'm going to bring to the fireworks, and that means I'm a patriot. And it's like, no, that's not what it means.
It's not what it means. Every single attorney has taken an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States, and then whatever state they're being barred into, to uphold the Constitution of that state.
Mm-hmm.
We said before, oaths matter, words matter. The Constitution is our agreement to each other about what we're aspiring to be at our best. And part of what makes our democratic experiment worth being something that some corporation has created these American flag boxers and created these American flag chairs so that people can go with pride and go sit and watch fireworks also being put on by another corporation. We could go down a lot of twists and turns with that one. It's at the end of the day, it's our Constitution, and it is, to exactly what you were saying, being trampled on. And I'm watching people who I respect. I'm watching people who I know to be good people, to have good moral values, to have cared a lot about parenting people with good moral values, to be on some level cheering this on. There's no version of the common good where we're cheering on paramilitary violating constitutional rights. Right. And I thought we were all on the same page about that. So I don't know what to do now that we're here.
I mean, no pun intended. It's their racism trumping their sense of freedom and being pro-Constitution. It's their racism justifies literally everything. They can go back and it'll allow them to do like the double backflip off the trampoline onto the trapeze and like do a million spins in the air, where they're doing all this mental gymnastics about how this is somehow helping the cause of freedom by restricting it. Like, it's all because they're trying to justify this racist, emotion-based way of going about their lives. And again, it's like they're stuck and they've only got the two emotions, but they're going to inflict the runoff, this toxic runoff from the production of these two emotions onto everyone that they can, because it makes them feel justified about what they've done.
And I want to be clear too, like we've talked about how it's a man problem, this having two crayons, either rage or numbness, but it's not, because women have been conditioned and socialized that they have to participate in society in the same way. Otherwise, they're deemed hysterical. Otherwise, they're deemed. And on the racism point too, one of the things that I'm finding really interesting is that the minute you open your mouth, I'm a white lady. And there's a lot of shit coming my way to justify racism toward other people. And that's interesting too. Like,
Oh yeah.
so is it really about racism? I mean, of course it is, but is it really about racism? Because once, a white man says it, a white woman says it, then, I mean, are we now not white? We've lost our whiteness. Don't get me wrong. I was always a Jew, so I probably wasn't allowed my whiteness from the beginning, but by the same circle.
That's how it's been historically. If you look at the white people that participated in the civil rights movement in the 60s, is they were fair game for lynching too. Like, it more so because they wanted to make an example out of them. So you did lose your white privilege to a point. It was not ever like, you never fully lost it. You had the skin privilege of walking in someplace and somebody didn't judge you in a certain way, but it's such like a core, like, how do we fight this core level of xenophobia where people are so, it goes back to that unwillingness to be uncomfortable. Oh, hey, this person who's different than me makes me uncomfortable, so I must inflict something on somebody else to regain my comfort, instead of just simply processing your discomfort and becoming a better person for it. Like, it's just that the privilege of being able to kill somebody else, to remove somebody's life in defense of your sense of comfort. People, I don't think, are really putting the two and two together on that, because the people who come in and say, well, I'm pro-ICE, they are literally willing to kill another human being or human beings to protect their comfort.
Well, and then that's obvious, right? They've signed up for this job and they're doing this job. So I don't know how to talk to an ICE agent, and I'm too angry, I think, to be the right person for that. But I'll talk to other moms that one of the things that we should all have walked away with the murder of Renee Good is that could have been any mom at drop off, any mom in her mom car. It is incredible to me, some of the backbends that I have been involved in. Well, she was yelling at them. Okay, what? Or she was in the way, or literally insert anything here. I can't even fully, because my response to that is like, okay, I didn't know that in this country there's the death penalty for
yes
being a nagging bitch. Like, even I don't agree with what you're describing as her behavior. I wasn't there, and neither were you. But even in the version of the world that you are espousing to me in this moment, that I'm in this conversation, why does somebody who does that deserve to be killed by a government agent?
Right. And mind you, her last words are on video, very calmly saying, I'm not even mad at you.
I'm not mad at you, dude.
And okay, so here's where I'm going to potentially make a lot of people uncomfortable.
Let's do it.
And this is something I have bit through my tongue on so many times. I'm happy that people came to the fight after Renee Good got killed. I'm happy people came to the fight after they saw Alex Preddy get killed, because they could see themselves in it. But
what about Philando Castile? What about Philando Castile?
Right. But what about any of, and I'm not going to say like whataboutism, because yeah, but you're right. But that to me, by extrapolation, tells me that they didn't care enough to be involved until they saw someone like them get killed.
Maybe.
And remember, anger is a choice. That has bypassed my process that usually redirects being upset into productivity. For a while, that just angered the hell out of me. And I have come to terms with it. I've sat with my own discomfort on that. And for the most part, it's motivation now. But for a while, I was just mad about it.
And I'm not trying to be an apologizer, but first of all, I think 100%. I think no question. And I think that speaks to a lot of work that all of us as a society, as individuals, like we still really need to dig into that. Also, we've all been brainwashed, and there has been this belief that if you look like me and you've been given opportunities that I've been given, then there's something, quote unquote, like you can't be touched by this other really scary thing that just like exists, like that's not for you. And that's never been true, obviously, and it should make you angry that anybody bought into that, but they still did, and they obviously still are. So if that's what shook people, I'm not going to judge somebody who's waking up for the first time. And I want to find new ways to wake more people up that haven't woken up yet. And I know a lot of people have given up on that. I've seen that rhetoric before, where it's, I'll never forgive anybody who voted, for, and I think there's a lot of validity in that, because look at where we are and look at what we're experiencing, and people are being killed. Like,
yep,
there's real consequences for your choice at the ballot. But I also just don't think that that's how we get people to realize that they are brainwashed in a cult and working against their interest. And there's a lot of shame in recognizing that you've been wrong and admitting that you've been wrong. And it's really hard for people. It's especially really hard for the people that still are buying into this.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to make it as safe as possible without being an apologizer for it, I think is.
Yeah. And that's like, I similarly struggle. That's why I was biting my tongue for a long time. I don't want to discourage people from coming into the fight, but like,
I'm glad you said it. I want you to not bite your tongue.
I know, but it's like that same thing. It's like, I want to, as much as I want to like grab people and shake them and like, why did it take you so long? I also want them to stay in the fight. I want them to continue to, like, if this was the beginning of their journey of understanding, I have to recognize at one point was disengaged. At several points, actually, and sometimes engaged in the wrong direction, especially as a teenager. And I have to look back and go, you know what? My entry point may have been sooner, but I still had an entry point. And I have to respect that. I don't like it. I don't like it at all. But I have to respect that and go, okay, well, you're here now. But there's still that like big chip on my shoulder. It took someone who looked like me getting killed to bring the mass amount of people it did into the fight. I think that's indicative of a larger problem.
I agree. I agree. I think that is the problem, quite frankly. And I think it is the problem that fascism in general has figured out how to weaponize.
Yeah. And I just realized, I'm sorry to do this to you. I have to probably wrap it up pretty soon, cool. Just because I'm going to go door knocking with a neighbor for some other project.
This has been awesome.
Well, there's two things I want to talk about. So I want to get this in. I just want to there's one big important thing, something that is on the forefront of my mind since the Delaney Hall thing. And this is something that I think a lot of other people and in a lot of other places haven't come to peace with yet, and they need to, is that policing somebody else's way of protesting leads to division, and sometimes it's necessary to check in with each other. However, what we did here in Minneapolis is, because of that, holding space for people to protest differently, we found that what worked was having no one single approach to solving the federal invasion that we had. We had a test run on fascism, like blunt brute force fascism in the streets. We were the test kitchen for that, and we told them that meal couldn't cook. Like, that's where our success was. If you ever hear me talk about success, about, hey, we succeeded in Minneapolis during Metro Surge, it's not that they left. They're still very much here, but we stopped the in the streets brutality version of fascism that they were trying to do a test run on. And we did that by having so many different people lean into their strengths and say, I'm here, I can do this. I might not be able to do it all, but I'm going to do this. And we had so many different corners covered. And it was sort of like a thank you, I guess is what I'm getting around to the lawyers that lined up at the ready and showed up to duty to try and keep people from being shoved in a hole and disappeared. And I can't look at any particular group and say, well, if it wasn't for these, then we wouldn't have succeeded, because if it wasn't for all of us doing this stuff, we wouldn't have succeeded. But the lawyers, I don't think, get enough credit for being like on the spot, ready to go, sometimes on site and waiting to help all this. And I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
I'll speak to two things that you said. First, I'm going to just read the St. Paul principles.
Okay.
Because it's important. And as people are mobilizing across this country, they should look up the St. Paul principles. There's 4 of them. 1, our solidarity will be based on respect for a diversity of tactics and the plans of other groups. 2, the actions and tactics will be used will be organized to maintain a separation of time or space. 3, any debates or criticisms will stay internal to the movement, avoiding any public or media denunciations of fellow activists and events. And 4, we oppose any state repression of dissent, including surveillance, infiltration, disruption, and violence. We agree not to assist law enforcement actions against activists of others. So I think that's why it worked in Minnesota. We all showed up the way we were supposed to show up. Some of those things were in contravention to one another, and we always came back to the St. Paul principles. And we fucked up and we made mistakes. On the lawyers, it was pretty incredible to be part of. I'm not going to speak to what everybody did, because I think that some people want to operate in the shadows of this. There's a lot of risk with showing up and in showing up with your law license if you want to keep your law license. And I recognize, I was actually having this conversation this morning, that the day might come where somebody comes through my law license because of how I've shown up here. And I am comfortable with that.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for all the ways that you showed up. But this is why I wanted to be a lawyer. So I'm going to practice the way I'm supposed to practice. What I did personally is I got involved with a lot of different groups. And I feel like lawyers have a tendency to silo. So what I wanted to do is bridge as much between the organizers and the legal community as I possibly could, so that I could understand need, connect who I knew in the community to fill need. And I'm not alone in having done that is one of the ways that we all work together collaboratively, but within silos. I also want to give a huge shout out to our district court federal bench here. It got to a point where if you filed a habeas petition, you might get an order in 13 minutes. And it didn't matter what time of day you filed that habeas petition, because for a while, if you didn't get that filed in the 3 hours since a person got abducted, they had left the state, and now we needed to connect with people in other states to file the petitions to get them out, which we also did. And I want to say that too, that there were national networks of attorneys that were working between places that we knew they were moving people. So if that's happening to you, reach out. We have a playbook. The other thing I did is I love going on Saturday nights at the 331 Club at 7 p.m. to what is called the Drinking Spelling Bee. I recommend it to everybody in the Minnesota, St. Paul, etc. area. But I knew I was going to always be there. So I would walk there and I'd stop in to businesses. You're talking about connecting with your neighbors. Your neighbors are also your local businesses. And ask for the manager, have a conversation with the manager, introduce myself, give a card, talk to the person who is running that business, who inevitably has set up their own internal framework of how to take care of their people, including their back of house people. And their back of house people have family members and friends, and those networks can very easily get bridged out. And I said, every Saturday night at 7 p.m., I will be sitting at Spelling Bee. You can always find me. A lot of people got rides to work at that time, because if you were driving your own car, the likelihood of abduction was higher. So work became a place that was made safe by managers and employers and other people that were working in these different businesses. So within that safety, you always knew where to come find me. I had various encrypted messaging chats with lots of different organizations around town, and we were able to connect people that had a need with the attorney that had the skills to fill that need in as much of an efficient way as possible. And it wasn't the answer, by no means did that surpass, but we connected 82 people with lawyers from just going to Drinking Spelling Bee and getting creative and finding ways where you can see where people are already building pathways, and that's where you can fit in and jump in your skills would be the recommendation that I would make, not just to lawyers, but to also lawyers, that not everyone's coming to your office when this is happening. In fact, nobody can come to your office. It's very, very difficult to do that. And it became very difficult to get in the car and drive to everybody else. And there's also risk associated with that if your car starts getting followed, which it will if you are doing this enough. So that's one of the ways that I found a way to plug in and connect with people in places where they felt safe to talk to me.
Okay. Now there's one more thing I want to do, and I'm trying to remember how to record on this platform. I think they've moved it.
Yeah, let's talk about, I love this. So I'm wrapping up.
Yeah, and I want to beat you to the punch on this one. Hey, do you want to go to prom?
Oh, I would love to go to prom with you.
You've asked so many people to go, and nobody's asked you. So I want to ask you, do you want to go to prom? And then can you tell us about what this is?
On June 11th at Bauhaus, we are all getting together for the dance party that we all know that we need. If there is a person that really showed up when you were experiencing the worst of humanity and reminded you about the best of humanity, this is your chance to say thank you by also asking them to prom. We are raising money for Minnesota 5051, which, as you said, has been instrumental, your neighbor Nick, in keeping track of flights. And we're also raising money for a mutual aid group, Juntos Podemos. And I love that I just got asked to prom. Thank you.
Yeah, someone had to ask you because you've asked so many people. I think it was fair to make you feel wanted as well and valued as well as someone who really went into battle with us in trying to keep people safe and surviving this mess that we're still in. So yeah, the whole idea of fascism needing our buy-in and our acceptance and the death of joy, and we refuse to give that to them. We are going to have joy where we can find it. We are going to recharge each other where we can. And sometimes it means being a little silly and having a grown-up prom.
I love it. I'm so excited to go to prom with you, Shane. And it's been awesome recording the podcast. Cool. I'm also realizing I maybe didn't get any of the volume on that, but I'll figure it out.
Yep. Well, I can also send you the audio from this too.
Perfect. Yeah.
If you don't get that, I will extract this audio and send it to you. I got to go. I got another project I got to do with some more neighbors and connecting with neighbors, not just on ICE, but again, the other things that are going on with the fuckery of our homeowners organization gone awry in our form of government. This time it is with the local government, more or less specifically Jacob Fry being a rat bastard, but that's a whole other discussion. And we need to go do some door knocking and stop some gentrification from happening. So I'm going to go do that, and I will see you around, and most definitely at prom.
Thanks for all that you do. We keep us safe. Fuck ICE.
Yes, fuck ICE. And not just the negative part of it, fuck ICE, but also love to the people around us, love to our neighbors. And, I think dealing with all of this negativity has created this bloom of social connection that I hope is going to persevere.
I think it will.
Yeah.
It's really powerful. All power to the people.
Yes. I'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Something I'd like to tag on to the end of this episode, as I'm getting used to a lot of these new people listening and having this many people listening, is that I would really appreciate it if you would go onto your various podcast streaming platforms and leave me a review and a comment. That kind of thing bumps us up in the algorithm quite a bit. And if you want other people to hear this, please help us out and go do so. And again, thank you to all you new listeners for coming in and listening to this podcast.